Hello, everyone. Welcome back to She Birds Podcast. Today's guest is Natasha Deen. She's the author of the Grime series, the True Grime series, plus many more. So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, hello, listeners. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on here. I'm delighted and excited. There's what is there to know about me? If you give me permission, I will cross the street to pet your dog. I will follow you home for cupcakes. But I think really, for the listeners who are listening with a dream and a hope to be a published author, then I think the only thing you really need to know about me is I am just a person who thought it'd be really cool to try to write a book, and it would be awesome to be a published author. And I went out and I gave it my best shot, and I did it. And if I can do it, you can do it too.
Exactly. I agree. I agree. That's amazing. I'm still working on my book. I've been working on my book for like 10 years.
But some books just take a long time to grow, right?
Yeah.
And then when they do, it's awesome because then you know the characters, you know that world like so intimately, right?
Yes.
So
So
some
when did
some
you
yeah.
so when did you first realize you wanted to be an author?
When I was a kid, I thought this would be really, really cool to do, but no one really knew. Like, none of the teachers, the librarians, the public librarians, my folks, like, no one really knew how you went about becoming an author, and so it was just something I put away. And then I started writing again in university as a way to uh, self care. Is that the word we're going to use?
It works though.
Right, to do anything that didn't make me feel like I was being crushed under the weight of all of these textbooks. And then by then, it was like 100 billion years later, and there was the internet with information on what you do and how you do it, and you could find online writing groups, and you could find conferences, and all of a sudden there it was. The world was open, and I could do my research and find out what I needed to find out.
Yes, that's amazing. So, what or who inspired you to start writing?
When I was a kid, it was reading Gordon Corman's This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall, which he wrote when he was 13, which I was like, hey, come on, adults. And all the adults were like, nah, man, we don't know how he did it. So when I was a kid, it was reading this, and he was the first author I read who wrote funny for kids, right? Because most of the time they were these like highly moralistic kind of stories. And Bruno and Boots were just like this fun group of guys, right? And then when I was an adult, the thing that spurred me on was reading this really terrible book. And I thought, well, either she does not care about her readers, or writing is much harder than I think. But I have a really hard time with people who sit on the sidelines and criticize and then
Mhm.
don't give it a shot themselves. And I thought,
Mhm.
okay, big mouth. Like, here you are sitting in your armchair, thinking you know better. So go on in there and find out which one it is. And it
Yeah.
was both, right? It was both. I mean, writing is much, much harder,
Mhm.
and writing towards publication is a far different creature than when we grow up and we write for our teachers, right? Like, they're totally different animals. But also, she did not respect her readers, and she was the most powerful lesson I learned as a writer, which is rule number one: respect and care for your readers. And if you do that, then everything else will come to you. But if you don't do that,
I agree. I agree. My problem with writing stories is I feel like my mind is all over the place. Like I can go on one subject and I'll be in the middle of another subject, and my mom is like, "What is this? Like, why are you writing about this and then talking about this the next
yeah.
second?" And I'm like, I don't know.
But I think that's sometimes just the way our brains go. Like, when we think about writing, we dismiss it. Like, we're so sort of casual about it. But if you really think about what a startling thing it is that you're taking something that exists as electrical signals in your brain, and no one can see it, no one can touch it. And you're going to take all of those, like, electrical storms, and you're going to put it on the computer, you're going to put it on the page, and you're going to do it in a way that when someone else picks up that story, all
Mhm.
of a sudden you have this like telepathic moment where everything that's in your brain is now in this person's brain. And that takes time, and it takes, you're talking about the 10-year thing. I mean, for authors, like, we're going to write a lot of drafts because there's however many drafts it takes for us to tell the stories to ourselves. And once we're like, that's the story, I got it now. Then you go, right? But your brain is looking at sort of like the infinite possibilities of what can be. And so, like, we go there. Because that's what, I mean, that's what clears it up. That's edits, right? That's not creation. Those are two different things.
Yes. So this is a question outside of the question I was going to ask you, but me starting out as an author, like, I'm afraid to tell people about my story without them stealing it. Like, I don't want them to steal my idea before I even have time to write it down myself. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, that's fair. But here's the cool thing with being a writer is that we all have our own voice, and we all have our own way of telling stories. And I guess it's easy for me to say that because I do conferences and I do writing workshops. And so one of the things that we'll do is we'll go in and, I'll give the students a writing prompt. Here's a prompt. Go ahead, write. Take 10 minutes, warm up your brain, write this. And then we have an opportunity to share. And even if they're writing on the same idea, like a girl goes into the woods, how it manifests is completely different because none of us see the world the same way, right? So, but I understand what you're saying, and I feel you because I don't like to talk about my stories until they are ready for a reader, because there's a tension, right? Like, the story is inside of me, and if the only outlet I have is to put it on the page, then I'm motivated. But if I sit here with you and I tell you my story, then that tension is gone, right? Like, that release is there, and I go, well, I can pick that up later. And so I don't until I know what that story is, and as a way to motivate myself, I don't. So yeah, I feel that.
So I was looking on your website. This is another question outside of that. I was looking on your website, and I really, really, really love the cover of Across the Floor. So can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Oh yeah, so it's Luke Walden, who is he's like the kid who's gonna go to the NFL. He's got it, but he's also injuring himself consistently, and the coach is fed up. And the coach says to him, listen, if you want to stay on the team, like, I can't have you be injured like this all the time. Go take a dance class, like take ballet, take contemporary dance, because they, football it's short, sharp kind of movement. So your muscles don't stretch, and but if you're doing like dance, then it's this whole different way that you move your body, and it strengthens your tendons and all this kind of stuff. And Luke is kind of like, dance? And his coach is like, yeah, because there's like a slew of football players and athletes in general that do, dance and ballet, because it's amazingly, like, it just strengthens them. So, Luke is this total athlete. So he's like, oh, okay, sure, fine, I'll do this. Like, how hard can dance be? I am a super athlete. And then he gets into it and finds out that dance is just so much harder than he thought. And it also creates all kinds of conflicts with his family, because he's always doing like all of these extra things. And the parents are like, cool, but we need you to help us with like the family business. So now here's the conflict. Do you go off and do this thing? How do you marry that with the responsibilities you have to yourself, as well as the responsibilities you have to others, right?
Oh, wow. I'm going to pick that book up. That sounds amazing.
Thank you.
So what would you say your interesting writing quirk is?
Well, I don't know if it's an interesting writing quirk, but for odd writing tips that I pass on, warm feet. Warm feet, because we don't think about it, but blood flow, right? So if your feet are warm, the blood is flowing to your body, and it relaxes you as well. And they, if you're someone who also has trouble falling asleep, it's one of the things they recommend, like, make sure your feet are warm. Yeah, having warm feet, I find, helps me be a much more productive writer. So there's my odd tip for the day.
I didn't even know that. Like, no wonder I fall asleep faster whenever I have like my warm little socks on. I'm like,
it's blood flow, right? It's blood flow and it's relaxation. Yeah.
Wow. So where do you get your information or ideas for your books?
Oh gosh, like everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. And I have, so the book that is the most recent book is I'm trying to find, there we go, Maria and the Plague. So I just, I was talking to my editor, and the Girl Survive series from Capstone Books is phenomenal because you have these girls in these, like, these moments in history where you just think, how do you survive this? So the Titanic, 9/11, the Night of Broken Glass, the factory fires, like, it just kind of like World War II, like the runaway slaves, like all of it. And they, the series puts girls in these positions to show, like, how would you survive this? So Matt and I were talking about the Black Plague. This is before COVID, right? And I'm like, this is great. So, I do like the quick research and I hone in because Florence, Italy got hit hard, like 1347, 1348, they got decimated. And Florence was like, it was such a prosperous city. Like they had their own currency. Like it was just a very, very well-off city. And so I start researching it. And as I'm researching and finding out about all this stuff, I'm just panicking because I'm thinking, please don't ever let a pandemic hit while I'm alive. And then it did. But it was amazing, right? Like the things that you find out that you find out when you research, like Florence, we had travel restrictions. Florence had travel restrictions. Mm-hmm. There was mass burials for us. There was mass burials for Florence. Like the similarities were amazing. And the differences were stark. I mean, here we understand, hygiene. And so it's like, wash your hands and, keep our surfaces clean. But back then, so Nostradamus actually showed up in the research because he was a doctor and he was like, wash your hands, clean yourselves. But the doctors at the time, I mean, the whole society at the time thought that, like, and I'm hoping I remember this correctly, but like that your body would absorb water, so it was really unhealthy to shower. So there's Nostradamus being like, so Nostradamus is all like, clean yourselves, and the doctors were like, this is madness, don't listen to him. So it was so wild to see like how similar we were, right? And yet how completely different things were. And again, like you had people who sort of went sideways and the world is ending, so who cares about anybody else? But you also had people who really stood up and said, no, we are in this together and we will get through this together. And even though Maria and the Plague deals with a really heavy topic and terrible things like them having to burn their clothing, which in that society, you didn't give away your clothes. You didn't burn your clothes. They were all handmade, right? So even though you've got like all of these things and bodies being left in the street, you also have Maria being strong and kind and loving and finding that teamwork and finding like the humanity in herself and the humanity in other people and coming through a really traumatic time even stronger than she went in, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, ideas are everywhere.
Yeah, because I was looking at all of your books, like all of them on your website, and I was like, wow, they're a different range of books, like different stories and different. Yeah, well, I was like, wow.
Yeah. Well, I just really like stories, and I love telling stories, and like not every reader likes the same kind of story. So I have dark stories, I have horror stories, and I have the fun stories and the contemporary stuff, and then also like how you tell a story for the littles is different than how you tell the stories for the bigs, right? So I have, fun stories for kids who are like 7 to 9, all the way up to the big littles who are like, 18 going on 41. I don't know.
Yes. That's amazing. I love the different ranges you write from. That's amazing. So, how old were you when you first wrote your book? And yeah, how old were you?
So I actually didn't finish my first novel until I was 30. And then I think it got published like 3 years later. It took me about 3 years to find a publisher who was interested in the kind of story I was writing.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, now I don't feel old now because I'm like I'm in my mid-30s. I'm like, Late to
No,
me. I'm already
don't feel old. I think Frank McCourt. I hope I'm remembering his name correctly, but I believe it's Frank McCourt who wrote Angela's Ashes, and he did not. He did it after he retired from teaching, I think. So y'all, please fact check me because this is my Swiss cheese memory piecing together all this stuff. So I could be completely wrong. But I think he was like in his late 50s, early 60s before he published his first book. And then Andrew Davidson, who wrote Gargoyle, I think it took him 15 years to find an agent and to find a publisher. So some stories, right? Some things just, some things are like, they're like the the dandelions, right? They just crop up, and then some things are like the Christmas cactus. They're going to come once a year. And then, some things are like the really big cacti that's out in the desert. And it's like every 25 years, you get one flower and be happy, right? So,
true. So what does your family think about your writing?
I'm really lucky. My family and my friends are very supportive, which in the beginning was a little bit alarming, because it takes you, it takes a while before you want to say to people like, oh, I'm a writer. Because, when you start saying, oh, I'm a writer, people are going to automatically start saying, oh, well, are you published? Oh, where can I, and you're like, I'm an emerging writer. I am a writer in the sense that I am writing. I did not say I was a published writer. That is something different. But yeah, so I told my friends and my family this is what I wanted to do, and they were super low key about it. They were like, "Oh, okay, sure, cool." I was like, "Oh, okay." But then, talk about a plot twist. Suddenly, so I say this, and then, like within days, people are checking in on me. Hey, how's our writing going?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, you thought and I was not allowed any excuses, right? Like I'd be like, well, it's really hard and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And they'd be like, well, take breaks.
Yeah.
Just set a timer, like for every, and I think, when we were talking about writers and success, I think it's really important. It's really important to find like your network of people, right?
Yeah.
You got to find your humans who will support you and who will encourage you. And on the days where it's just really hard, they're going to like bring you the cup of tea. They're going to sit with you in the shade and help you reclaim your energy and start again. Because writing is, it's a marathon, right? Like it is not a lottery. And you're not going to walk and buy a ticket and boom, there you go, right? You have to be willing to really put in the effort.
That's true. It sounds just like my family supporting my interviewing. Like when I first told them that I was going to start interviewing people, like they was like, well, how are you going to get paid doing that? Like, are you going to charge people? And that's all they're focused on is getting paid. And I'm like, well, I'm just starting out. I can't get paid interviewing like 5 people. They're going to be like, you just interviewed 5 people. Like, where's your stats at? Where's your status? How are you going to get us known? And I'm like, Grandma, I can't do that. And then, so I got sponsored. And she was like, so are you getting paid that way? And I'm like, yeah, I'm getting paid. She's like, how much? Is it big money? No. She's like, well, you need to be paid more money. I'm like,
hey, Grandma believes in her baby girl, man. You can't mess with the grandmas of the world. You don't step in between them and their grandbabies ever. Ever.
Man, I told her, I was like, I'm not Oprah status yet. I'll get there one day.
Yeah.
One day I will. That's my dream, to be Oprah status.
That's excellent.
So what do you like? Yes. So what do you like to do when you're not writing?
I don't know if I'm ever not writing. I love just hanging with my people, right? My friends, my family, and streaming cozy BBC murder mysteries, taking my pupper for a walk. I live a very just really low key, relaxed. Anything that involves food, I am so there. I'm so there for anything that involves food.
Do you like sushi?
Oh yeah.
You do? Okay.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
We're going. It's my favorite food. I can eat sushi all day long.
Oh, sushi is so good. See, now I'm hungry. Thanks a lot.
So, what is the most surprising things you learned in creating your books?
For me, so just speaking strictly for me, that it gets harder with each book because with each book I realize what a really incredible thing it is to put something out there that connects with people. And with every book, I'm trying even harder to make those connections, and I'm trying even harder to really create a good experience, and to, because like there are, I think something like 8 or 1,000 books being released every single day. And to me, it is a huge deal when, of all the books you could pick up, you're picking up mine. And
Yes.
so I want to be worthy of that choice, and I want to try really, really hard. And so sometimes I can overthink it, which is not surprising if you know me. But it was surprising. I would have thought by now I would be super confident in my writing, and I'm not. I still sweat every single word and every single page, more so now than before.
Wow. And this is way off the subject of my questions. What is your True Grime series about? I've always wondered. I saw that
Oh,
on there and I was like, what is that about?
so True Grime. So basically, there's a magical world and a non-magical world, and the magical world is fed up with us destroying the planet. And so, and this is kind of tying into weirdly COVID. Um, but it was written like years ago. But so the magical community decides what they're going to do is they're just going to send viruses out into the non-magical world that will wipe out humanity, and then the Earth can reclaim itself again. Um, but within the magical community, there's division because one group wants to do this, and the other group says that's terrorism and genocide. And humans are not as old as we are, and they need a chance to grow. And so True Grime is two characters, Pepper and Harley, who go into the magical world and pretend like they go in as teens to figure out what the virus is that has been released and to stop it before it destroys humanity.
Wow. That sounds nice. Like, I'm gonna pick those up too. Because I was looking, I was like, what is the True Crime series about? And I was like, I need to ask her that. But wow, that's amazing. So how many books have you written and which one would you say is your favorite?
I think I have about 25 books for kids and teens, and then between short stories, novellas, and novels, I think there's another 10 that I had for adults.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, uh, and then sorry, which the second question was which one is my favorite?
Mhm.
Oh gosh, all of them. No, because writing is really hard.
Mhm.
And so the fact that I finish any book, I
Mhm.
feel is such an accomplishment because I think one of the reasons writing is so hard is because it asks us to face ourselves on a
Mhm.
daily basis. And I
Yes.
think, whether you are published or not, or staring down at your, 75th rejection,
Mhm.
the fact that you did this amazing thing deserves all kinds of celebrations. And
Yes.
so for me, yeah, all my books are my favorite because I
Mhm.
I did it. I set a goal and I did it, no matter how long it took.
Wow. Yes, that's amazing. Again, like this is another question outside of the question I was going to ask you. So, when you was looking for a publisher, like how do they I'm just trying to figure it out. How do they like when you go to them, do they just say, "No, we're not going to pick up your book," or like how does that work?
So resource wise, what I would encourage writers to do is to query things like query letter, QUERY, query letter, and then publishers that, and then query like, and then Google like publishers that publish YA or publishers that publish science fiction, because that'll give you a list, and then you can start researching them. But on a publisher's website, what they will have is they'll have like a submissions link, and you go into the submissions link, and they'll tell you what they're looking for and how they're looking for it. So some publishers will want you to send in like actual hard copy, so you got to print off your pages and you mail it out to them. Other publishers just want you to send it to them as an email attachment. Most publishers will just ask you to send like the query letter, which is like a one page. It's sort of like the cover letter for your resume, right? So it's you talk about your book, like the cover blurb, so what would be on the back of your book or the inside flap, what your credits are, the I want to say the logistics, that's not the right word, but like what is your word count? What is your genre? Who is your audience? and that's all stuff that you can find online. So you go in, and there's really great examples of, like, if you query, like, query letter examples, you can find, sometimes people will post, so you can get a really good sense of, like, in today's market, what does a query letter look like, because
Mhm.
it's different from, what it was like 10 years ago. It's different from what it was 2 years ago, probably. But
Mhm.
yeah, so you go in and you send it, and then just follow their instructions on their submission page. And I would encourage writers everywhere, really follow their instructions, because if you follow their instructions, you're already, like, ahead of 99% of the people that
Mhm.
will send in. So, you'll have a publisher who says something like, "We don't take science fiction." And then they'll have someone that goes, "Here's my science fiction book."
Yeah.
And then the publisher just kind of goes, "Well, yeah, cool. Won't publish you, right?" So yeah, so you wanna read and follow the instructions. We are all writers. Let us prove we are also readers as
Right.
well.
Right. I agree. So, in your opinion, what do you think makes a good story?
Reader connection, right?
Recognition.
Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, stories can take all kinds of different forms and all kinds of, and go into all kinds of different places.
Mhm.
But if you can hook your reader, if you can hook your viewer, if you're a screenwriter, or your audience member, if you're a playwright, that's the battle. I mean, we talk about submitting to publishers, and you've got 3 to 5 pages to get a
Mhm.
publisher interested, and to get an agent interested. And if you don't hook them in those 5 pages,
Yeah.
so sad, too bad. You have to try again, right? Because yeah, and I understand that frustration, because I'm the worst person in my original drafts, where I do a lot of exposition and explaining stuff, and
Mhm.
then all of a sudden I'm like, oh wait, the story starts on page 50. Okay, good, got it, right? So don't rush the process, for sure. Don't
Mhm.
rush, right? There's time.
All right. Because I was viewing, what is the lady's name that did the Harry Potter series?
Oh,
I forgot.
really?
Huh? Oh, J.K. Rowling. Yeah,
Yeah.
her. She said she was rejected a lot of times before somebody picked it up. So that does give me hope of starting my book and go ahead and write it and get it out there. But I'm so scared of rejection. Like, that's my biggest thing. Like, I'm scared of that they may say, "Hey, we don't like it. Go to somebody else." Like, I don't know.
You will very rarely have a publisher that tells you we don't like it. They'll usually just tell you it doesn't fit their market.
Uh,
And it's true, right? Like, publishers are what's the word I'm looking for? They have a brand, right?
mhm,
They publish a certain kind of story. So there's some publishers that their strength is nonfiction. So there's some publishers that, if you think about the publishing company Tor, I think they're science fiction fantasy, right? Versus Harlequin, who is, romance through and through. And so, when you submit, and you get back that rejection, it's really important to understand that this is not a personal rejection of you. They're just looking at the manuscript and the pages as, is this saleable? Is it
mhm,
marketable? Does it fit our vision for like our catalog that's coming out? And if it doesn't, then it's, there are people having to pay
mhm.
mortgages, just like us having to pay mortgages. And
Yeah.
so they make those decisions based on that. And it
Mhm.
can be disheartening, for sure, because we don't always know why it's going to get a rejection, because they don't have time. You're going to, mostly get a "thank you, not for us," or, "we considered this, but, we're going to pass on it right now," or "it just didn't light me up." And that's okay, right?
Mhm.
Like, you don't like every single book you come across.
True.
So, right? So you don't want, and you want a publisher and an agent who really is in love with your work and wants to grow you, and wants to champion you, right?
Mhm.
And if that takes, 17 or 20 times, it's not a rejection. It's just one step closer to the person and that company who will help grow your career as a writer, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's not about you. It's about the work, and it is frustrating if we don't know why. But I was at a conference, and I pitched what I thought was a really original idea, and it
Mhm.
was a cozy mystery series, And the main character, you know, she lives in this little tiny town, and there's been a very contentious election. She wasn't even running, but everybody in the town likes her, so now she's been acclaimed mayor, and
Wow.
murders happen. So now she's like a mystery solving mayor. And I thought, I haven't seen that. And so
Yeah.
I had like 4 different ideas, and I pitched it to the editor because I was, I'm at this conference. And she picked one of the other ones. And I was really surprised. I said, I thought for sure this was going to be the one you chose.
Yeah.
And she laughed and she said, Natasha, you're never going to believe this, but we just signed someone who's doing that exact same premise. And we can't have 2 series with murder solving mayors, you know? And I was sort of, it was such a good learning lesson, because had I just sent it to this editor as a query letter, I would have gotten back a really blanket kind of pass. And then I would have eaten my heart out wondering what was wrong with my story. And there was nothing wrong with my story. It was just someone else got there first. And so, our imaginations as writers when we're writing is great. Our imaginations as human beings in the world, when we start telling ourselves really destructive stories, is not great. We don't know why we're being passed over for these manuscripts or these opportunities. It's not for us to worry about. It's for us to go, thank you very much. I'm going to go knock on this door. And then we go and we knock on that door.
Yes, I agree. I want to thank you so much, Natasha, for coming on my show and interviewing me about your books.
Oh, thank you. This was really fun. Thank you so much for hosting me.
You have a great day.